Can you put this
He's still on grind.
You're not experiencing
I'm doing it. I'm willing to take this.
It's just like you don't realize how much how draining it is.
I used to wait 16 days in school, and now how I come from
It's probably
you know what?
Yeah. Like if you go to tricks.
So when you went to down there, because they were now and then I was like, oh, I know what's going on here. Because I know it's like, oh, one first. One came when I know the other girl. So I was like, oh, and I was like, wait till you do
Yeah, well, like, I guess it's what you did.
Okay.
Everyone, hello.
Hello.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you to everyone who's come through. I know everyone here, so it's a bit awkward if I start speaking like really formal or whatever, but we've got Shuranjeet Singh here, who is the founder and director of Taraki, which is a sort of mental health charity movement organization that's looking to reshape like approaches to Punjabi mental health, specifically Punjabi communities, Sikh communities, but beyond that as well. So yeah, should be good. If you've got any questions, like as the talk's going along, put your hand up, say my name, shout my face, whatever, and yeah, we'll answer it. Yeah, all good? Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
So yeah, today's mega chill, mega informal, like just sat in a circle. Any questions or anything at any point, just let me know. And I'm here to answer anything. Why Taraki was started, bits about the work we do, some of the challenges we see, and how we want to move forward, particularly with Punjabi mental health. So just before that, everyone, I'm just going to give everyone like 30 seconds to a minute just to kind of zone into the room. And close your eyes, do some breathing, Simran, Mulnantar, whatever kind of gets you into into this space, because I don't know, we're all coming with different stuff from the day. I was on a 2.5-hour train with like people behind me talking about like going to travel, and it was like the typical kind of let's go traveling in Bali kind of gap year kind of thing. So I need to forget about that before I start. But we'll give everyone like a minute or so, and then we'll come back into it. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna be asking you some questions, and we're just gonna kind of go through different kind of topics related to Taraki, myself. But at any point, anyone's got any questions, let me know. Once we've done the little interview part, we will do like a group like reflective activity, where we're going to be thinking about what is our vision for Punjabi mental health in the year 2050. What do we see that looking like? What are the challenges to getting there, and what's going to help us to get there? So that'll be something we can maybe go away with, because people do talks all the time where they just speak at people. I zone out after 5 minutes when that happens to me. So we can just make this interactive, make it, don't want to say make it fun, because it's going to be reflective, which might be fun. And yeah, we'll kind of take it from there. But we'll give it a minute now just to kind of zone into the room. Maybe you want breathing, Simran, thinking about, I don't know, rock climbing, which I've been doing before sleeping, very strangely. Just kind of lying there thinking about rock climbing. All to their own. Just a minute, and then we'll jump in. All right, everyone. I lost count. That was somewhere around a minute, I think.
Cool. I'm going to say questions. I'm talking to him, but I'm like addressing it out here because the microphone's there. So don't get like weirded out by that, please. Okay. So firstly, I wanted to talk about, because I found this out I found this out a couple of months ago actually, that you're born in Handsworth, from Handsworth. What kind of influence do you think that had in terms of coming from multicultural, predominantly working class background? How does that influence how you look at mental health from an early age?
So, just before we jump into the Handsworth stuff or the Birmingham stuff, who here is from Cambridge? So we're all coming from somewhere. We're all coming from somewhere that is likely going to be quite different from where we are right now. And so for me, when I started my undergrad in Bristol, it was the first time anyone in my family had basically left Birmingham for longer than, I don't know, like a week for a holiday or whatever. And for me at that time, you know, we didn't really know how to deal with that. We didn't really know how to equip ourselves. I didn't know how to equip myself with living away from home. You know, we live 15 minutes away from where I was born. We've moved house like once in our lives from Handsworth to another place in Handsworth, which is like a area of Birmingham just outside the city centre. And it was only when I started, especially kind of at undergrad, that I realised how different so many other people's experiences were to the experiences I had kind of growing up. And I recognised and realised that I could walk around Handsworth like this, you know, basically shorts and t-shirt all the time, walk up and down Soho Road, and I wouldn't have to think about anything else. I would feel at home, I'd feel seen, I would feel a part of everything else that was going on around me. But suddenly, like at uni, and as we all know, when we make that transition, you're surrounded by different kinds of people with different kinds of experiences, people with, you know, different kinds of prejudices as well. And for me, that is something that smacked me in the face as soon as I got to uni. So suddenly, I wasn't someone who could just go about living my life in, you know, a way that I felt comfortable in my surroundings. Suddenly, I felt as though I was hyper visible. Kind of looking how I look, kind of, you know, acting how I act, and presenting myself like how I present myself. Suddenly, it was like everything was completely different. And so that made me realize, one, almost how much in a bubble I had been in my kind of upbringing, in the sense that I wasn't prepared for that step out. I wasn't prepared for, you know, making that change in my life. And quickly I realized that wasn't going to be easy. And so I know I've veered a lot off the question, but when I think about how growing up in Handsworth, how growing up in that context shaped me, it shaped who I am, it shaped how I viewed myself. But because of what I had access to, what I didn't have access to, it really made that step out. It made that transition out really hard. And, you know, I'll share something with you all. I remember kind of, you know, first couple of weeks at uni, and there people just asking the most ignorant questions I've ever heard in my life. The questions I'd only ever heard on that Just Rain video. And I was like, people don't actually ask this. This doesn't actually happen. And then I was standing there and freshers was like, oh yeah, so, you know, can I feel your beard? And I was like, nah. I was like, not with them hands, no way. And I was just completely taken aback. And, you know, there's some things that I'm sure many of us have been asked, which you kind of laugh off and you just think, you know, it's just someone who's probably, you know, pretty tipsy, someone who's just, you know, chatting crap. But then there were other people who were saying quite, you know, purposefully ignorant stuff. People who, you know, I studied politics and international relations, people who would come out with the most ridiculous stuff about colonialism, about, you know, kind of their relationships to kind of black and brown communities, the fact that they come from, you know, a school or a place where they didn't have to interact with anyone who was different to them. And I just thought, I need to make myself stop being this type of visible. I need to make myself like blend in, because I can't deal with this. And then I made, looking back, I made one of the biggest, I'd say not even mistakes, but things that really shaped me. I stopped wearing my moustache, and I just started wearing my hair in a bun. And I was like, okay, let's go with this. Let's see what happens. Hopefully people look at me in a different way. They didn't look at me in a different way. It didn't change anything. The only thing it changed was now I had a me at uni and I had a me at home. And that is really hard. And, you know, some of us might have to balance with that, but people don't appreciate how hard that is. Especially when my context back home, coming from an Amritsari family, you know, and them being accepting of me making the choice I made, but me feeling so guilty whenever I came back home and feeling as though I had to be someone different. just to make sure, parents, family, my community didn't think, oh, this guy's gone off the rails, this guy's gone, made all these stupid decisions. And so there's this thing, I feel, in our society where we might feel comfortable in a space, but that space has its benefits and it has its huge drawbacks. That space might not give us access to the things in our society you have to access to make it or to be successful. And when you do, the things that you learn in that space, that personality, that identity in that space is pushed away. And suddenly you have to choose. Am I going to kind of go down this route, or am I going to kind of hold on to who I am? And so, for me, Handsworth gave me, Birmingham gave me, and continues to give me so much. But it was just a real tough transition. And I'm sure, I'm speaking to everyone here, and everyone will have experienced some level of challenges with our transitions in different ways. But for me, it just really kicked me, and it made me think, you know what, it shouldn't have to be like this, man. It shouldn't have to be like this.
So at the time in uni, how do you outwardly deal with that? Do you talk to people, like that feeling of loneliness, maybe alienation or whatever? Did you talk to anyone about that? Did you find any sort of like, in the end, like over the course of the 3-4 years, however long it was, did you find any sort of recourse to it?
Yeah, so, my gut reaction was to focus on my uni work and just cut myself off from everyone. And so I just used my work as an excuse, really enjoyed my work, really enjoyed studying, but just did not do basically anything. Didn't interact with my friends, kind of changed my interactions with my family, and really just kind of fell into like a downward spiral where you're just on your own constantly, you're just doing your work. The days kind of blur into one, and suddenly it's the end of term and you've got to go home. It was like that for about 2.5 years, up until the middle point of my 3rd year. And I remember, one time there was no Sikh society at Bristol. There was like an Asian cultural society, no Sikh society. So we wanted to make a Punjabi society in the final year. So we made a Punjabi society. And I remember being at the first meet and greet event. It was kind of in a room like this, maybe just a bit bigger. Had samosa, had tea, all that kind of thing, right? Serving people their jar, everyone's eating, that kind of stuff. And I was just there, picking up the bundle, the paper plates, and just making sure everything was warm. But I couldn't speak to anyone. And I was like, why can't I speak to anyone? Everyone was that's the little groups, everyone getting on with each other, having conversations and stuff. But I couldn't speak to anyone. And that was just wild, because I was thinking in my head, why can't I speak? I want to speak to people. There's someone there I really want to speak to them. But there was something that was stopping me from doing that. And I remember every 10 minutes, I'd walk outside, check the football scores on my phone, and just think to myself, why can't I speak to anyone? Why is it that even when I'm around people who I think I'd get on with, I still can't speak to people? There's something that's stopping me from being able to do what I want to do. And I remember that evening, I kind of went back to my flat, and I was living with a few other people. And, I just mentioned to one of them, I was like, yeah, this is really weird thing that I'm kind of experiencing. I just can't speak to anyone. I can't go into like big rooms. I can't go into crowded rooms. It's just, everything feels really like intense and like kind of closed off. And, that friend, he just sat there and listened to me vent for like 45 minutes. And after that, he looked at me and he said, you know what? That's kind of similar to some of the stuff I was experiencing a while back. And he starts talking to me about all this stuff that I didn't know anything about. He opens up and he talks about the challenges he was experiencing. And he made me feel heard, he made me feel listened to, and he made me feel as though I wasn't alone. Because I didn't go to my friends or family and talk about any of this. Because, I didn't want to go speak to, my parents, my family, because I didn't want them to worry about me. Because when I speak to, when I kind of speak to people about this, and oftentimes, Gordio said to me, oh, is it because your parents wouldn't have understood? And I was like, nah, they would have understood, but, I'm an hour and a half away from home in the car. I don't want them to worry. We're living away, for my parents and stuff having to deal with so much other stuff. I don't want them to have to worry about me. that should be the least of their worries. And so I don't need to tell them about this. I can kind of deal with this myself. And slowly, after I had that conversation with my housemate, it was maybe an hour and a half, but that hour and a half completely changed the path of, me as a person and how I kind of interacted. And slowly, me and my other housemates, we'd start having these conversations. It wasn't that we'd sit in a circle like this and talk about it, playing FIFA, having dinner, just kind of going out, walking or whatever. We'd just start having these discussions, and slowly, we were able to support each other in that way. And, I'd gone to the university counselling service, that kind of thing.
So you knew it was a mental health thing at that point?
I knew it was something that was stopping me. I would say immediately I wasn't like, oh, this is a mental health concern, or like this is something mental health related. But it was almost through that discussion with my mates that we were able to say that, this is something that is almost like, it's hard to say when you're experiencing mental health challenges that you're experiencing them, and framing it as mental health. You're just kind of like, I'm experiencing something, and you want to focus on the thing rather than trying to label it. And so it was through that conversation that we were able to really have these really uplifting and supportive discussions that were really hard at times as well.
Did you feel at that time, like you were saying, you started not wearing the star, or however, how do you reconnect, or did you ever disconnect with your Sikh identity? How did that relationship play out over the course of it?
Yeah. So that's always been a really interesting relationship, because growing up kind of in Handsworth Gurdwara, many Gurdwara, and many Sikh communities, I just remember seeing people my age, they would go and do their part, they would go and do Kirtan, they come off, and they were still dickheads. And I was like, what's this, man? I was like, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. And that pushed me away when I was younger. That really pushed me away. And the only thing that, really kind of kept me connected was Kirtan. That was the main thing. And so then when I was at uni, I really quickly realized that something had a hold of me and was keeping me close. And I remember one day going back and talking to Dad about this, and he was like, there is, when we're kind of within this faith, within this, dharam, there is something that holds on to you, even when you don't think. Even when you think you're far away, there's something that holds on to you. And so it was over time that I would say I kind of reconnected with Sikhi in a way that was slightly different from how it was when I grew up. Studying and kind of looking into, politics, social justice, all that was my route. For me, it was interesting, because I was just there at uni with a beard and a bun, and then the final year I was like, you know what, I need to put something else in my head, man. I was like, and so slowly started wearing wearing a vodka, just again at uni, because I was like, I can't jump to full discard. You're gonna be like, what the hell's going on? Which again, it's when you feel really self-conscious about that kind of thing. But I remember kind of one of the biggest things that made a change for me, and it wasn't something that came first, it was something that came later, was that I realized at home, we've got Bart playing 24/7. Even if it's bare quiet, how we had that music when we had our eyes closed there, it's just bare quiet, and you're not gonna hear it fully unless it's quite quiet. And I think it was my BBG who got me one of those, those things you can get from I don't know, they sell them at some Godore, and you can get them from Amazon, where it's bare preloaded Bart and this little square MP3 player. And I just got one of those, and I put it in the corner, plugged in, and it wasn't that the Bart wasn't even loud. It was just at a really quiet volume, but that completely changed the aura of where I was. That completely changed the aura of my room, of my kind of my headspace when I was studying and all that kind of thing. So there are these tiny little changes that come from my relationship with Sikhi that have been integral. And I remember saying to my dad, I was like, this really helped. And it helped me to kind of reconnect with myself, reconnect with Sikhi, and support my well-being. And my dad just looks at me and he said to me, "You think you reconnected with Sikhi? Because Sikhi always had you by the collar, had you by your t-shirt or whatever. You've just noticed that again." And I was like, "You are fair enough."
So how do you go from? So you talked about Bristol having those conversations towards the end of your studies. How does the seed for Taraki get sown at that point, or is it so much later on? Like, how does that happen?
So everything happened in Bristol, and I was grateful that I'd had the support I had from my friends at that point. But for me, that Taraki still wasn't a thing at that point. It was just that I was so grateful for the support I had. I was so happy at how we could develop that relationship. But it also got me thinking that I saw people who were struggling in my community back home. I've seen people, friends, family members who weren't lucky to access that kind of support that I had access to. And I especially noticed this with men. Right. I really, really noticed it with guys. And I recognized that I was having conversations with my guy mates, guy family members, and when I used to chat with them and just let them speak, there would be loads of stuff that they would want to speak about. Loads of stuff that they wanted to speak about that they might not have been able to speak about with others. And I was open with them about the challenges I'd experienced. I'd speak for about 5 seconds and then they'd be like, yeah, you know what, I've had something like that. And then within 10 minutes, they're still chatting, 15 minutes, they're still chatting. And I realized that we need to approach mental health differently in our communities, because these guys are saying that they don't want to speak about this with anyone else, but they're okay speaking about it with me.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't have to be that just one person can do that. Everyone, all of us, have the potential to be able to hold that kind of space, right? And I just thought, what? There's something here about Punjabi and Sikh men specifically, and mental health. We need to kind of really push forward this conversation.
Without maybe like infringing on other people's personal experiences or whatever. In your experience, what have you found as being like the main? Don't want to use the word trigger, but like the main thing that's behind their mental health problems, or how do you like?
So
is it bereavement? Is it alcohol? Like, how does it?
That's a particularly hard question, just because you only know the reasons for the stuff that's disclosed. And so, for example, when people say, "Oh yeah, 20% of Punjabi men may have experienced, these particular challenges," it's only the 20% we said that is.
Yeah.
And so, even before thinking about that, even before thinking about what are the specific issues, what are the specific causes, we have to try and create that space where we can allow people to come forward, or we can allow people to access that support when they feel they need to. Because otherwise, we can have all the best services in the world, but if people aren't there and feeling like they can actually come and seek that support through the services, it's not going to be able to serve the people it's intended to.
Right.
And so I just remember one thing really stuck out to me. It was about how our understandings of things like gender have really made it hard for, I'm specifically focusing on, say, Punjabi and Sikh men, because that's experiences I can personally speak to better. How it's made it really hard to have these conversations, because displaying, people say, displaying emotions is frowned upon. Bro, you can be angry, you can be competitive, but there are certain types of emotions and there are certain expressions that are really pushed down and seen as, kind of being vulnerable, being weak, that kind of thing. And so quickly I realized that we need to really shift the conversation about vulnerability and openness being a sign of weakness to actually being a signal of strength. And that's what we've really tried to do, especially with our work with Punjabi men for the last few years. And it just, for me, it's really linked to a lot of the studies that I was doing in Punjabi, looking at things around gender, masculinity in Punjabi communities. So I remember when I was 14, 15, I remember going to the Gurdwara. Don't laugh. They're in my probably like that tight skinny jeans. They were bare tight, and they were acid wash in it. So it was like light blue skinny jeans. Yeah. I walk in, and I'm walking towards the London Hall after going into the Darbar Sahib, and my Mamaji was standing there, and he looks at me, and he's with his mates. He goes, "Why got your sister's jeans on for, man?" All of them just started creasing, and I was like, you know what, fair enough. But I was like, what's so bad if I've got my sister's jeans on? Like, why is it an issue? You know, these look alright. I think they look alright. I remember going back home, just and saying to my mum, I said to mum, I was like, your brother laughed at my jeans, and she looked at me, she goes, yeah, don't listen to anything he says. You dress for how you want to dress. And so you know what? I went back to the governor and the skinny jeans, and it's fine. 6 months later, there's like 3 or 4 people wearing the same skinny jeans. I was like, there's something happening here. I was like, there's something happening where I was pushed out for wearing these because someone was like, looks like your sister's jeans, they're too skinny, what are you doing? But then something must have changed. Yeah, and suddenly it's okay to wear them. And so this related, can we bring it back to mental health? It showed me that attitudes, behaviors, and expectations around what's allowed change over time. They can change. And so that is really what pushed us to start Taraki. In October 2017, even we just started at the beginning as focusing on Punjabi men's mental health, and since that we've kind of expanded. But at the beginning, that seed was there because I knew that there were these particular challenges, but that we could change.
So the idea was always from the beginning. You have this theory, you have this idea of changing attitudes. You always plan to put it into action. You always plan to have practical effects, or did that come later on?
I would say, we started at the beginning, say focusing on Punjabi men, just with mental health awareness work. Yeah. Just going out and speaking about these particular challenges that people be experiencing. Like you scroll back to the Instagram at the beginning, there's just loads of posts of Punjabi men talking about experiences of mental health challenges and also, their thoughts on mental well-being. And the reason we started with that is, I remember talking. This isn't the case, but I don't blame you for thinking that, because when it's just Russell Brand and Jeremy Clarkson chatting about mental health in the news as it was like 4 or 5 years ago, that's we are going to think that we are going to think that's the only conversation. And so we started focusing on awareness. Yeah, we started focusing on awareness. All right, who here is aware that rockets fly in the sky? Yeah. Who, not an engineer, who can tell me how that happens? Are you an engineer? Are you maths?
No.
Okay.
Propulsion in it.
Bored, man. Okay. A lot of people are aware, but we don't actually necessarily know how these things happen, why these things happen. We can be aware about mental health. We can be aware about mental health challenges. But there's another step that needs to be in that process so that we can actually support ourselves, educate ourselves. And that's the education piece. And so slowly I realized that there's all this great mental health awareness work happening. Awareness is the first step. If we stop at awareness, it doesn't mean that we are more comfortable or more confident with talking about these topics. And so we started thinking, all right, awareness, education, and then we started looking at where can we apply this? Where can I can know how rockets fly in the sky, but where's that information going to be useful? How can I actually get that information where it needs to be? And so we started looking at social support and thinking about how, I've been so lucky to access that space with my friends. How can we make sure other people who want to access that type of support can do that? Right. And so we have awareness, education, social support, and then bits around research. And the research bit is more, we wanted to basically be a bit more unique and communicate our ideas a bit differently. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how we moved. And it's not something that happened like that. This happened over the last 4 years. Recently, it was 4 years since we started, and it's taken time. It's taken a lot of me going to cool, one second. It's taken a lot of me going to events and me and one person being the only one there. Yeah, it's taken a lot of that. It doesn't just go from nothing to doing these kinds of talks or having a room full of people talking about these things. There's a lot of thinking, failing, reflecting, and then going again. But yeah, sorry.
You keep saying we. Who's involved in Taraki?
So at the moment we have and also I've got a thing where I always say we. Basically, I don't know, I think it's a thing where like, whenever my dad says to us like, oh, what are we saying today? Or like, where do we want to go? It's not like, where do you guys want to go? It's always we. And so I've kind of got this thing where I always say we. But it started off with just myself, then a couple of years later we had a small team come together, and now we have about a member of like 12 team members. We kind of do different things. You know, we've got some folks who help with research, some people who facilitate our spaces, you know, for Punjabi men, Punjabi women, Punjabi LGBTQ plus folks, and then social media people, that kind of thing.
In those,
do you think the challenges for men are worse than challenges that women face and mental health challenges?
I would say that they're different. I wouldn't say that they're better or worse. I think the conversation about worse, it doesn't lead anywhere. It just kind of, you know, people can say, oh, well, we have it worse, we have it that. I think it's different. And I think the different aspect is important. Because people often say, you know, who's heard that statistic that 75% of men are the people who die by suicide? You know, it's like they really pushed it out over the last few years, isn't it? But what they don't tell you is the proportion of women who attempt suicide is much higher than the proportion of men who attempt suicide. So it's just that the people who die by suicide, 75% are men. And so, you know, I think what's important is that we look at these challenges, we look at the obstacles as you know, as unique, but not like better or worse.
I'm skipping ahead a lot here, but because you talked about Punjabi men, recently that partnership with Movember, could you elaborate on that a little bit? How did that come about, and what sort of the mission statement was that?
Yes, so essentially we've run spaces for Punjabi men, Punjabi women, Punjabi LGBTQ plus folks to kind of come together, connect, and talk about topics that wouldn't otherwise be spoken about. We used to do these in person. We were in London, Birmingham, I was doing them in Toronto, but obviously since the pandemic they've been online. But importantly, you know, these spaces are ones where people can feel confident and comfortable with talking about what they want to talk about. You know, it's not we're going to come here and talk about, we're not going to come here and say, yo, you can't talk about this. Or if someone starts talking about something else, we're not going to shut them down or push them away. And essentially, we've been really lucky to secure a kind of grant from the Movember Foundation, which is funny because like it's beards and stuff. But we got a kind of grant from the Movember folks to basically train people up to be able to deliver these spaces. Because at the moment, you know, Taraki, we can run our one in London, we can run our one in Birmingham. We have facilitators, you know, people who can kind of really help with organising and actually taking that conversation forward. But what we're trying to do is actually develop a curriculum so that we can work with people, train them up so that they can deliver these spaces themselves. Right. So it's kind of like a thinking about how the future of this could look. You know, in my mind, and we've tried to do this, we've tried to do this, is work with, say, student communities to really think about how we can create these kinds of spaces, you know, more regularly. Doesn't need to be me here doing it, but just having an option, whether it's once a term, you know, once every couple of months, once every month or whatever, to just have that conversation in that way. And so we're slowly getting there, but it's something that you have to really be patient with, and it's something you have to, you know, we put so much stuff together that we put out in front of people, and then we're just like, people will like just not take it in or not engage with it, which is fine, because that means we've done something wrong. And so, yeah, a lot of it is about thinking about, you know, being creative, having different, novel, and innovative ways to approaching these challenges. Much like, I don't know, Taraki's my main creative output nowadays, man. Probably do these.
Yeah, I was going to say, like on the t-shirts and the hoodies and the sweatshirts, why did you branch out in that way, and what do you think it's achieving? Is there sort of like a plan behind it? Is it just like, are you trying to make it into more of a movement kind of thing?
Well, yeah. I don't know, as you could tell when I was saying I love the skinny jeans when I was younger, like, I want to be in fashion design. That would have been another life, I would say. I guess for the merch, like, it's just really nice giving people something that they can take away. And it's, at the end of the day, we can go out and do these talks, we can go out and connect with people in that way. But if we're not talking the language of the people we want to connect with, then we're just going to be seen as, oh yeah, they just do this, they just do that. But in building a movement, in building something that goes beyond our work, it connects people in a different way. This has been one of the best ways of doing that. We've got a guy called Harkaran who does the photography and is also one of our team members. And Harkaran, we've been able to shoot with so many people for these, for the merchandise. It looks sick. I ain't gonna lie, I'm not biased or anything, but it's nice. We've got a very nice pink hoodie. There'll be a flash sale in like 10 days. There you go. They're actually available now for like 10 days. And for us, it gets that conversation going a bit more as well. I've had people, we saw that boiler room set with that. Yeah, okay, we got a couple of nods. Someone comes up to me and goes, I saw someone with a Taraki t-shirt at the front of that boiler room set. This guy was basically DJing, and it was just loads of sayings stood there. And I was like, oh yeah, that was me. and then he's like, oh yeah, I recognize the Taraki logo. I was like, bloody hell. And then some other guy comes up to me, he's like, I was wearing my Taraki hoodie at a barbecue the other day, and someone came up to me like, oh, they do really good work. And that person was able to have a conversation with that person about mental health related stuff, just what challenges are in our communities, that kind of thing. It sparks conversation. And so, it gives me a bit of happiness with the part of me that wanted to be fashion designer. So, but it's a nice way to keep the movement growing and keep things fresh.
Sure. You talked briefly there about having student spaces, and when you first started doing those, did you notice a sort of generation gap in terms of outlook on Punjabi mental health, particularly between people of our age? And like you're saying, you talk to older people, maybe even Siane, in Gurdwara or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice a sort of a gap there in people's thinking, or is it generally sort of the same? Or
and this is something that I've done a lot of. I've had to make mistakes with this, right? Because I remember at the beginning when I used to start, when I was doing this work, people would say to me, oh, are there even words for mental health within in Punjabi? And I'd be like, you know what, there isn't, and this is so bad and all this kind of thing. And what I realized I was doing, I was just pushing away the existing. Of course, Punjabi has words for a breadth of emotional language that doesn't necessarily fit into our terms around mental health, but it has language around so much stuff that can be used to have those conversations. And I realized that actually it was me pushing away and saying, oh, Punjabi and Punjabi communities, this issue is with them, this issue is with, these are the challenges in these communities. When in reality, it's that the people who are having the conversations around mental health aren't doing it in a way that is meeting people where they are. And so, more recently, it's been about how can we interact, engage with people across generations in a way that makes sense to them. Because we all have a frame of reference. We all have, a way of making meaning in our lives. Mine is going to be kind of similar, but maybe quite a lot very different to my parents and my grandparents and that kind of thing. So being really, really attentive and aware of we've got different frames of reference in our lives is absolutely key to doing this work. Right. And it's not me saying, the older folks haven't got a language to talk about this. They don't talk about these things. How can I say that, my grandparents, my BBG who raised, 5 kids on her own, how can I say that my BBG doesn't understand mental health? And when I clocked that, I was like, oh man, I've been doing this wrong. But that's fine as well. We're all going to make mistakes in everything we do. But you just kind of think, okay, made this mistake. Let's try not to make it again.
Right.
Move forward.
You talked about the not having a word or finding out that obviously there were words. How did you land on Taraki as a name? I think it means progress, right? Advancement or
yeah. So Taraki Garna is to kind of take steps forward, advance, progress. Mom came up with the name.
Really?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Birth me, birth the name.
So what made you stick with that as opposed to, you see other sort of charities, organizations go like the Sikh minds or the Sikhi minds or however. What made you stick with that? What resonated like particularly with that? Did you just realize, oh, this is a sick word? This is
Rather than a sick word, I remember I was sat in a lecture, I was sat in a lecture with on paint, making this logo, and I was like, oh, this looks sick. And I was like, you know what, this is good. And yeah, you know what, I did not know what it meant until my mum told me.
Yeah.
And then, I was like, okay, you know what, this works, this is nice, it's short, it's snappy, it's nice in a logo. And it will make us stand out a bit, but fundamentally it reflects what we want to be doing. It reflects what we want to work towards with Punjabi communities, and it brings up another really funny point of where I realized I made so many mistakes. Our first tagline for Taraki, right, was Taraki wants to reshape how the Punjabi community approach mental health. Yeah, there's two things that changed. The first thing that changed is we changed it to Taraki works with Punjabi communities. Yeah, because there's so much in our society that says this organization has changed all this, this organization has changed that. It takes all the agency away from our communities who are actually doing this work. For me to say Taraki's changed this, well, actually, all we've done is create space, and people have made that change themselves. We might have helped them along the way, but we're working with them to make that change. And so the first one was Taraki is working with Punjabi communities. And the second one, as you might have heard there, is I always say Punjabi communities now in the plural, never in the singular. Because as soon as I say it in the singular, there are automatically going to be folks within Punjabi communities I will be forgetting about. Us working with Punjabi LGBTQ plus communities, working with disabled Punjabi folks, that, in my mind, shows the breadth and the huge amount of diversity within Punjabi communities that just isn't captured when we say Punjabi community. And when we're trying to do this work, I remember when people said to me, they were like, oh, you just work with Punjabi communities, why don't you work with South Asian communities, why don't you work with Black and minority ethnic communities, why don't you work with everyone? And I was like, we can spread ourselves really, really thin. You're going to only be able to get that much past the surface. There'll be no point. And people said, oh, Punjabi communities is too narrow. Bro, man, like you do the work, you realize that there are so many people within our community, so many subgroups, so many people who, if we were trying to focus on everyone, we'd completely forget about. And it's essential that when we're doing this type of work, that we're aware of those who might be included and those who might be excluded, even if we think we're really, really focused. So yeah. Just a random.
At what point did you realize that then? So you start off with a focus on Punjabi men. At what point did you realize that you kind of needed to take that intersectional approach, that you needed to look at women, LGBTQ plus, etc., etc.?
So for me, it was kind of informed by my studies. So kind of doing a lot of like social justice related reading, doing a lot of focusing on how we can uplift and work alongside everyone in our communities, rather than just like, oh, we say we're working with the Punjabi community. Ends up being one specific group. And so a lot of it was about listening to what the challenges are and responding. So I remember when people said, oh, can you do more work around Punjabi women's mental health? And I said, I'm happy to help facilitate that, but I don't want to be the person leading that because I'm a Punjabi man. And I said, I want to be working with someone, working with a Punjabi woman who I can support to take that work forward. And when the time came, a few people came up to me and they were like, we're interested in supporting with this. I'm like, great, we can take the work forward now. And it's similar when we were working with Punjabi LGBTQ plus communities. As someone who doesn't identify as LGBTQ plus, I didn't want to be the person leading that conversation. Why should I be the person leading that conversation? And so I was thinking my role in this is to support and work with organizations already doing this, and to try and support and share resources with individuals who might want to take that work forward. And so that took years. We started our work with an organization called Sikh, so it's a Sikh LGBTQ group. And we started our work with them because, if folks don't know, LGBTQ plus Sikh Punjabi folks will experience various kinds of discrimination and marginalization from both LGBTQ plus communities and Sikh communities and Punjabi communities. And we worked with them at the beginning to start this kind of project going. And slowly that's actually developed more and more. And now we have a specific organization that we partner with called the Open Minds Project that is led by Punjabi LGBTQ plus folks and is focused on Punjabi LGBTQ plus mental health. And so it's taking, this isn't something that happened overnight. This is something that happens over a long period of time. And it happens with all of us, being honest with each other, saying, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And me being like, okay, we should be doing that. Let's think about how we plant the seeds for that. Yeah.
And now with the Disabilities in Focus series, could you briefly explain how that's come about? How, what's the aim with that? And how does that connect to your existing work with Taraki?
Yeah. So the Disabilities in Focus series, about a year ago, I read an article about how to make Jewish spaces more accessible, and I recognized there was a lot of great, there was some great work that was happening within the disability space within Punjabi and Sikh communities, but I hadn't seen something that went to that level of depth in thinking about how we make our Gurukar, how we make our Sikh spaces more accessible for disabled folks. And so we started I put together, did a call out on Twitter or whatever, put together a team of folks, and we worked through planning these different kinds of articles on Punjabi and Sikh communities and disabilities. And I was just thinking in my head, we'll get one article done on Sikh spaces and accessibility. What it turned into was 4 articles, one on Sikh spaces and accessibility, one on Gurmat and disability, which I would encourage everyone to read. It was one of the most, it was just absolutely unbelievably well crafted, using knowledge from Gurbani, using knowledge from people's experiences, and thinking about how we have such a revolutionary, uplifting framework that goes beyond everything we have here. Then there was an article on lived experiences of disabilities, and then there was one by an Auntie G whose son was diagnosed with a very, very rare genetic disease, and the experiences of, say, stigma from their communities and stuff. I would encourage everyone to read that series. If there's one specifically that interests you, read it, because it will connect you with some of the different challenges that we might not be aware of. I think many of us will think about things and reflect on the privilege that we have, but some of us might not be doing that very often. And it's important to recognize that there are so many parts of our communities that we often forget about, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And it links into Taraki's work, because we're trying to think a bit more about how we can platform Punjabi disabled mental health in a different way. And again, it's like that seed. So just slowly getting that conversation going and seeing where it goes. I don't want to say this is what it's going to turn into, that's what it's going to turn into. But all I can do is hold that space. All I can do is share my resources, share my time with the people who want to take it forward, and then let's see how that develops.
We'll do one more question before the group session. Briefly, as a Sikh now, in this Taraki sort of frame of mind, how does it continue to influence the work you do? How does it, day to day, how do you think about Sikhi? How do you interact with Sikhi within Taraki?
So I would say at its foundation, Taraki is driven by Sikhi. We work with Punjabi communities, I say Punjabi communities because we did not want to enter that Sikh politics space. As soon as you say you work with Sikh communities, you are drawn into a whole different battle. And so we wanted to have that agency and have that autonomy in doing our work. I would say in terms of Sikhi, in how it manifests in my life, I'm not going to come out and say, I do my nickname every day, yeah. All I'm going to say is that most mornings I try and walk and listen to my nickname. If some days I can sit there and do my nickname, fairs, but I'm not putting that huge expectation on myself. But I know it's something that I want to work towards. I would say there's been a big thing around looking after myself and putting in boundaries so I can do seva of others. Because sometimes when we think about seva, it's about how can we serve other people, how can we how can we kind of give ourselves on our resources to those who require them? And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's also important to think about how can I do that sustainably? Because I know that if I went into like top gear for the next 6 months, I might get loads of stuff done, but be burnt out by the end of it. And it's so important for me to know that I'm trying to look after myself. And like sometimes people be like, oh yeah, that's selfish, or you need to serve on more widely. But I know that I'm in this for the long run. And so I need to be able to draw those boundaries, say no at points, someone saying they want to go and have a meeting here or go and do this new kind of work, drawing those boundaries, looking after myself, so that I can continue to try and serve. And I guess the final bit from my side is trying to be, and I try, fail at points, it's hard at points, of course, is trying to be fearless in what we do. Trying to not only talk about the things that we do in theory, but actually putting our word into action. And for me, that is working with those who are most marginalized in our communities. That is working and sharing resources. It is speaking up against power, speaking courageously against power, being able to stand up for folks who don't have, an institution backing them. But these are, kind of simple things that I relate to. We'll all have different ways we relate to Sikhi and how it influences our lives. But it's only kind of, it's just funny because you only reflect on it when you're asked about it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone got any kind of questions?
Sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
Okay. So you talked about giving a space. So I would think like gurdwaras are a really nice place to have such talks, but they just don't happen. We do get katha and people try to talk about mental health stuff there, but it's just one person talking and we just don't get other people's opinions. So do you think that the organization or somebody else would be willing to provide that space and suggest the ideas that they should be doing that?
So working with Gurdwara has been a very interesting experience. It's been a huge learning experience because there are so many ways of doing things that we're kind of tied into. Like, for example, I remember when we started doing university talks, it would be like a lecture. So someone would stand at the front, talk, and all that kind of thing. But we don't learn like that. Like, not everyone learns like that. There are some things that you can learn by just being told about it. But when there are topics like this, it's about relating to people. It's about speaking with people. It's about, learning about each other rather than, oh, I need to learn because this person's the teacher. And I think in some situations that has made it into how some Sikh spaces are shaped, where you have someone who knows everything and then everyone else who's told. And for me, it needs to be much more of a mutual process. And so for me, there aren't a lot of Sikh educators who can do the mental health stuff in a conscientious way. And that's really hard, and it's really sad. We've worked with a couple of folks who can do it, but these types of spaces will be led by the Sangat. These types of spaces aren't going to be led by people who need to do 10 talks in a week, who do talk in the morning, talk in the evening, talk in the afternoon. This is going to be led by the people who are a part of that Sangat and want to try and work and uplift with those communities. And it's also like when we do this as well, you need a group on the ground. Like, we can always come in. We get people saying all the time, can you come and help us do mental health work in our Gurdwara or in our community? It's fine, we can come and do a talk, but people are going to forget about it when they leave after 20 minutes. And so how do you keep that conversation going? How do you make it something that's more consistent? Even if it's once a month, once every 2 months, once every 3 months, just keeping something going. And so we need to realize that we're not going to get immediate results or immediate satisfaction from a lot of this stuff. This is long-term game. This is something that requires a lot more thinking, a lot more commitment, and a lot more, at the end of the day, a lot of self-sacrifice from us, from the people we work with, and it's.
So, kind of going by how you mentioned that Taraki has kind of got foundations in the Sikhi. But firstly, did you get many kind of non-Sikhs coming to you guys?
I would say 75% of folks who engage with us are probably. And then this is okay. Sorry, this is also a very interesting question because people have different relationships with Sikhi.
Yeah.
And so we did in our COVID research we did last year, we asked folks, do they identify with a faith? And then if they said Sikhi, we actually asked them, oh, do you identify as, are you say someone who's Amritdhari? Are you someone who is non-Amritdhari but you're practicing, you're close to Sikhi? Or are you someone who would say you're born into a Sikh family? And there was so much difference across that. And so, when people say, oh, is it mainly Sikhs? It's kind of like, I would say it is mainly Sikhs, but even in that, there's people with so many different kinds of relationships. When we were asking people about their support, the support that they used during COVID, we saw a huge difference between, say, Amritdhari Sikhs versus non-Amritdhari Sikhs. Accessing professional services was completely different. There was more of a kind of, more of a emphasis placed on engaging with Sikhi and engaging with faith. So it's such a loaded question. But I would say most folks, probably about 75%, would fall into that Sikh category. Yeah.
So what I was going to ask you, and I guess this applies to some of those people maybe who aren't associated with Sikhi within that category, but how would your approach change at all if you're dealing with someone who's not Sikh or maybe not associated with Sikhi?
I would say that it's for us, it's just important with knowing our audience and covering bases. We did a talk at multicultural, and the way we structured it was me, Shuranjeet Singh who's doing basics work, and Dr. Darshan Kaur, who is from Sikh Mind, and someone from the Sangat as well. Bro, I could tell when I was sitting there, 5% of people were listening to me. Everyone was just there like, and that's fine, man. I'm not going to connect with most people. I get it. But when Baljeet was talking, bro, people were zoned in. And my man was going in and out of Punjabi, he was able to navigate that so well. And it made me realize that, it's about identifying who can connect with different kinds of audiences. And so there might be folks who, we could say that there might be Sikh folks who feel as though they want more of a, very kind of in-depth understanding of Gurbani and mental health, which is completely fine. So we can offer that. But there are going to be other folks who actually want to talk about how their relationship with faith has actually, or their relationship with faith communities has made things worse. So it's not assuming that just because someone's Sikh, it means that they have a relationship with Sikhi or other Sikhs that is uplifting for them. And so it's almost allowing different kinds of possibilities. Yes, Bart, Simran, Keithan can support 100%, but then there are other folks who have been told that at their worst and most challenging times, and that's been used as a way to push them aside. I've spoken to so many folks who have said, oh, we went to go and speak to someone at the Godara when we were experiencing particular challenges. And they just said, sit there, do Bart and do Keithan, or do your Simran, make sure you're doing a Simran. And the challenge there isn't that those things aren't going to support someone, but if that person wasn't listened to, they were just pushed aside. Someone comes up to you and says, yeah, I've got this issue. Before they even talked about anything, say, yeah, you need to do more Bart. And so there's this disconnect. And I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier about how we speak about these things, how we relate to each other, how we talk about Sikhi. And it just kind of takes me back to when I was younger and I was saying, when I thought someone was preaching at me, I would just cut off. I would just be like, no. I would actively push myself away if I felt someone was telling me how to do things. Maybe that's my relationship with authority, but So we need to be a bit more conscious of how we have these conversations that involve people rather than kind of project or just speak at people.
Yeah, that's the answer.
Oh, got you.
Another one. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, how do you go about kind of approaching the stigma that is around mental health issues, and if there's any particular community, like Punjabi community you work with, where there's where it's more challenging to deal with that?
I would say that probably a good case study for that is our work with Punjabi men, because there was such a reluctance to talk, such a huge reluctance, such a stigma on these topics. It's, something that people people did not want to speak about this, especially kind of the people we were trying to kind of interact with. And so at the beginning, it was just me. You know, it was just me saying like, hey, this is important. I find this important. You know, I remember when we put out a call on our social media to say we're sharing experiences for Punjabi men around mental health. We got like one email in like a month. But what happened between that email and the next one, it was like 3 weeks. And it went down and down. And then suddenly it's a couple of emails a week. And what we realized was for someone to take that first step is something that's so powerful in combating these stigmas, in combating, you know, the difficulties that we have speaking about these topics. For someone to take that first step, it can be so, so powerful. You know, this is what we say to people when they say, oh, how can we combat these things in our lives? It's that everyone here can combat it. You know, sometimes someone might say something, you know, we're chatting with family or friends or whatever. Someone might say something that's related to mental health. You know, in our heads, we don't even process it and we just carry on with the conversation as it's going in the other way. But being attentive and actually being like, oh yeah, that's a great, let's talk about that a bit more. It shows that there are different possibilities. It shows that things can be done differently. And sometimes it takes that one person to just set that off. And I'm not saying that was me. I'm just saying that, you know, I have such low, I care so little about what most people think about me. No, I'm just going to be like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk about this. People say, why are you talking about it? So, well, if you don't want me to talk about it, it's going to make me talk about it more. So, I'm not sure if that answered the question.
I mean, that was. I think you did. That's the question,
It's all
but
good. If I didn't,
What is the question?
so there's the stigmas. Where it's particularly hard to. I'd say Punjabi men. Punjabi men, it's still very hard. We also forget the generational thing.
yeah.
You know, we've got a lot of the folks that we work to and we speak with who come to our stuff are between 20 and 40. There's obviously a huge generation there above that, where it's just it's that extra step harder.
I can only imagine it's really hard with LGBT. Not in terms of working with their community, but like in terms of people that you know, identify as heterosexual or whatever. Like, just I know because there's a lot of homophobia.
Oh yeah, okay. So like stigma around LGBTQ plus identities.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, one of the main reasons also we work with Punjabi LGBTQ plus communities is so that, you know, we can stand alongside folks. You know, we can stand alongside folks, and people say, "It's normalized."
Yeah.
People are, oh yeah, Taraki do this work with these. Oh, they've connected with this organisation. There's this organisation that does that work. And suddenly it's not like, oh yeah, you can't talk about that organisation. But we're trying to bring folks with us and normalise, you know, all of these different conversations in our community.
Because I know this is a specifically touchy topic. You know?
Yeah, hugely,
Yeah.
definitely. There's a couple more.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you go on about explaining, for example, like mental health or just the topic itself? How do you explain that to elderly, not elderly, but like the older generation? Like one of the key words they'll understand is depression, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the main thing they'll understand. But mental health doesn't have to necessarily go as far as depression. So how do you kind of explain like the mental health to in Punjabi, I suppose?
Great question.
You said that- you
Well,
said
I couldn't do it. I very quickly realised I couldn't do this. So we're working with folks who can do this kind of thing. So there's this organisation called Seek Forgiveness who have released like a little book. I think it's called Mental Health Gear on the Head. And that's got all kind of Punjabi translations for various things. But we know that releasing a book doesn't mean people are going to read the book. So it's important that we're able to, you know, develop and deliver content that is specific, that's also spoken. And so this is something we're trying to work towards. A lot of the time as well, like it was easier when it was in person because you could go and we could work with, say, Shuranjeet Singh to go and do a talk here or go and have these conversations there. We could bring people together in Sunday, but now it's so much harder to do that. Yeah, I think that's made it a lot more difficult. But I would say there are videos on YouTube. There's one called Haneri, If you type in, Haneri, like Haneri the Storm or something, it's a video that someone in Canada made, all in Punjabi, and it's about suicide. It's pretty intense. It's pretty intense, but it will get conversation going, but it's pretty intense. So there's like watch it yourself first, then.
Okay.
But yeah, there's content on there, and there's a few other options.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Do you find there's a challenge in balancing the act of creating a safe space for one sort of, not community obviously, but one culture, let's say, and the fact that that culture is, relatively small, so there's perhaps an issue of people knowing each other's families, knowing one another. Basically to sum it up, do you think there's ever a risk of people going, I don't want to share my issues in a safe space because that could be passed on to some auntie and then passed on to someone else and then back to my parents? Is that an issue? Because it could be like all of us are quite young, we're quite progressive, but I imagine if you create a safe space, we're like, let's talk about issues. I bet just because there's a chance that some of our families might know each other, even in our quite progressive group, people might not come forward to say, this is a challenge I face, or, perhaps this is an issue with my gender or sexuality. God knows what it's like for other people.
And this is, and you hit the nail on the head when you said it's the chance of it happening. Even if it doesn't happen, it's the chance that will stop folks from engaging and really, really make it hard. I would say when we're doing things in person, like these the kind of support spaces, we've managed to almost develop a really kind of uplifting and kind of connected culture with the folks that we're working with, where if people are hesitant about coming, our facilitators are able to have a chat with them before to help to reassure people. Everything is kept kind of confidential. We have like a group responsibility at the beginning, that kind of thing. But again, there aren't a lot of folks there over 55. And so you have that question around how do you get to that generation. When we work with Punjabi LGBTQ plus communities, there are folks who will engage with that work, engage with that support, who aren't out to their friends, who aren't out to their family. And so the question around privacy and confidentiality and building that trust is so much more intricate. And so that's why, it's taken a while to really develop that trust with the communities that we're trying to serve. I would say there are two things that would potentially counteract against that fear. One is as we said a lot of times, building trust, building genuine trust, rather than it being like because I feel like sometimes we say we're comfortable in the space or like we trust that, but in reality there's still this fear. And so it's how do we build kind of mutual trust with our communities? And the second is how do we combat, as Baji said, how do we combat the thing that is making people fearful, which is the reaction, the stigma. Because if, for example, someone felt, oh, my family, I'm not going to come to this because I'm scared my family will find out. If they didn't think that their family finding out about something was an issue, then it wouldn't be as much of a challenge. And so we're trying to figure out how different ways you can attack that, building trust, and then also being like, well, actually, if people find out about this, it's actually not too much of an issue. But it's different for everyone as well.
And I guess another sort of question I had in the back of my mind is where do you sort of envision, what's the kind of end goal? I think it's something you touched on at the beginning. Is there a certain community that you look at where you're like, I think the way they talk about mental health or deal with mental health is what I want for my community? Or is it just you want more discussion? What's kind of like your dream of what this will result in?
My dream is that Taraki is put out of business. We're working towards us not being needed. Obviously, that's easy to say. We'll start the merch though. It'll be limited edition then. But what I think we want to work towards, and I've seen what I've seen done so well. There's this organisation called Black Thrive. Black Thrive are an organisation that specifically focus and support Black communities in Lambeth. and they have gone into such depth. They have so many different types of kind of programs that they offer for their communities, things that are awareness-based, things that are education, spaces, they do loads of research, they're getting into policy, that kind of thing. And really what I'm trying to think about is how can we do this work at a grassroots level, and how can we make sure that it can influence in the research space, in the academic space, and how can we influence in that policy space. So it's thinking about how do we embed the knowledge that we have, because we can be doing fantastic stuff, having these types of conversations, doing stuff at a grassroots level. But if you can't communicate that to people who are in other kinds of decision-making roles, then you're not going to get the resources, you're not going to get the support, and you're having to forever balance stuff and do work in between breaths, and really kind of not be able to take that next step. And so it's thinking, right? It's like a strategic thing about how you want to balance the different sides of our work. We obviously want to carry on the grassroots stuff. That's incredibly important to us. We want to build up our research work because that's very unique in what we do. And we want to kind of think about how we can start to influence policy. Let's see how that happens. It took us 4 years to get where we are today. So yeah, see how it happens.
One last question.
So just kind of reflecting on both kind of the personal sides, but also the community side of mental health as well. And particularly thinking of, today's October the 31st, and a lot of Sikh spaces, conversations will be happening about 1984, and especially about intergenerational trauma. And I guess I want to ask, what kind of observations have you made about how kind of community healing is taking place, both in kind of traditional and in kind of modern settings, and kind of what do you think, what sort of opportunities and challenges do you think there are there?
So this is a really good question, and I'll kind of note my dad as a case study. I'm sure he doesn't mind. So dad grew up in a single parent household. BMBG was factory all day. Dad's brothers, cousins, kind of, I don't think gang-related activity. They got up to no good, right? And one day, there was a few people from the Gurdwara. They said to my dad, come and chill here. And suddenly, that's basically where he lived. And my kind of relatives on that side, numerous challenges with alcohol, with kind of financial challenges, health-related challenges that have come from their experiences of, essentially, I think their experiences of trying to live in this country, and the complications with that. And I speak to my dad. I was like, "What did you get up to at this point?" And my dad was like, he used to go, do Thai boxing or whatever with his cousins, and he'd catch up with them then. But all the other time, he wouldn't go to school. He'd just be a brother all the time. And it wasn't that he was there, doing fight, doing keeping. He was there doing. They played bare football, man. All they would do was play football. Dad would be there doing. He had to do like Maharaji Seva when he was like 8, 9, doing Maharaji Part when he was 8 and 9. But all he'd be like, they would play bare football. And all that generation, it was like maybe a group of 35 of them around my dad's age. They're they're probably like between the ages of, say my dad when he was a teenager, they were all teenagers as well. Literally, football constantly in the car park at the back. But there was this like fusion with the Keaton, the Bart, being in Sangat and being in a space where they felt uplifted and where they were actually, where they weren't able to actually go and get up to the bunga that everyone else was getting up to. And I remember when my dad said that there was a point where a few of the guys had go play bear snooker at it. And the Gurdwara said, we'll get a snooker table, we'll put it outside, we'll make a little shed for it. You play snooker here, don't go out and play snooker. And so for me, that's a really good example of the really multifaceted roles Gurdwara can play in our communities. It's not just people can go here on a Sunday and do this, and that. It's a holistic, person-centered approach. They've given me goosebumps whenever I think about it. In the healthcare system at the moment, they're talking about integrated care. Well, that's integrated care, man. It's the physical side, it's the emotional side, it's the spiritual, the faith-based side. It's literally focusing on this person and thinking about how can we provide them with the opportunities, the support, and the connection to allow them to be who they want to be. We've got the tools in it. We've got the tools. Sometimes it's hard to realize that we've got it in front of us. But I think, when we talk about community-based healing, there's a lot we can learn from other communities, but we also need to recognize that we have so much. We have so much.
Yeah, okay. We'll wrap up the live stream section of this. We've literally somehow only got 5 minutes.
It's all good.